Welcome to the deep dive. Today, we're jumping really headfirst into a pretty significant shift that's happening right now in international education. And it's challenging a lot of the old assumptions about where students go to study abroad. The numbers we're looking at are quite startling, frankly. So our mission today is to really dive into this latest transnational education report, the TNE report for 2024-25 from upGrad. It shows this dramatic change in how Indian students are choosing where to study. They're moving away from the big names, the US and Canada, and looking much more towards places like Germany and, interestingly, the UAE. We want to unpack the reasons why, the practical stuff, the career focus, the finances that are driving these, seismic shifts. The goal isn't just where they're going, but why these new places are becoming so appealing, and what that means really for global education overall, because this isn't just about visas, right? It gives you a real window into bigger economic trends, how values around education might be changing, and just the tough decisions young people are making for their own futures. You'll get a much clearer picture of why things like affordability, stability, and actual job outcomes are becoming so incredibly important now. Okay, so with that setup, let's look at the numbers that really highlight this change. I mean, for decades, the US and Canada were just the default choices for Indian students, weren't they? Almost automatic. But this new data, it tells a completely different story. We're seeing a real noticeable decline. Applications to US universities, for example, dropped by 13% year on year. That's significant. And Canada, its share of Indian student interest it plummeted from almost 18% down to just 9.3% in the same time frame. It's a massive reversal.
It really is.
Yeah.
And what's fascinating, I think, is that this isn't just a small dip. It's not noise in the data. It signals a real departure from what people used to call the big four, US, Canada, UK, Australia. The assumption for so long was just steady growth for those countries, always up. But this report really challenges that idea. I mean, a double-digit drop for the US and Canada's share nearly cut in half. That's pretty much unprecedented recently.
Yeah.
It shows a fundamental rethink happening among students and families.
Yeah, that scale really hits home. We're talking thousands and thousands of students and their families changing their priorities. It's clearly not just a fad. It feels like a major strategic shift in how they view this huge investment in education. But okay, so as some doors seem less appealing, others are opening up wide. And Germany, wow, the report shows an absolutely incredible surge there. Can you walk us through that growth? And maybe more importantly, what's pulling Indian students towards Germany right now? What are the drivers?
Absolutely. The numbers for Germany are genuinely remarkable. You look at the share of Indian students considering Germany, it's shy up from about 13.2% back in 2022 to, get this, 32.6% for 2024-25.
Wow, more than double.
Exactly, more than double in just 2 years. That's a massive leap. And it's not just interest. The German ambassador recently mentioned they now have around 60,000 Indian students there. That's up 20% year on year. So if you connect that to the bigger picture we were just discussing, Germany's appeal really comes down to, I'd say, three main things, three pillars. And they directly address those new priorities we talked about. First, and this is probably the biggest one, affordability. It's huge. Germany's public universities often have very low tuition fees, sometimes none at all, even for international students.
Right, compared to the US or Canada.
Exactly. Compare that to tens of thousands of dollars per year just for tuition in the US or Canada, plus living costs, which are also rising. So right away, Germany looks like a much more financially sensible option for many families looking for quality education without, crippling debt. Second, there's clarity and stability. This is becoming so important. Germany has pretty transparent immigration rules and, crucially, clear pathways after graduation. If you graduate with a German degree, there's a defined process to get a job seeker visa. You could stay, look for work, the road to permanent residency, even citizenship eventually. It's clear. It offers a sense of security.
Which is maybe lacking elsewhere now.
Well, it can feel that way. It stands in contrast to some of the uncertainty, the tighter visa rules we've seen pop up in other traditional destinations. That predictability is a big draw. And the third pillar is this shift towards prioritizing immediate career outcomes. Students aren't just thinking about the prestige of the country anymore. They're asking, where will I get a good job? And when? Indian students are very pragmatic investors in their education. They see it as a direct path to a career. And Germany, strong economy, world leader in engineering, automotive, tech, it offers really good, high-paying job prospects right there.
So they're matching their skills to the market.
Precisely. They're looking at where their degree will be valued, where they can actually integrate into the workforce quickly. So maybe a solid engineering degree from a top German technical university leading to a job at a global firm there. That's starting to look much more valuable to some than, say, a general degree from a U.S. college with a more uncertain job path afterwards.
That's a really clear breakdown. It makes perfect sense. Students aren't just buying a degree, they want a whole package, right? A de-risked path to a career, a good return on investment. And Germany seems to be hitting all those notes. Quality education, stable economy, clear future. It really shows how student needs are evolving globally.
Okay, so Germany's rise is definitely a major part of the story, but it's not the only alternative gaining ground. The UAE is also stepping up, but their approach seems quite different, more unique. What's their model? Especially given the report says, 42% of international students in the UAE are Indian? That's a huge proportion.
Yes, the UAE strategy is quite different, and it's proving very effective too. They're really leveraging this model of satellite campuses from well-known global universities. And we're talking big respected names here: Georgetown, Johns Hopkins, RIT, Carnegie Mellon, Weill Cornell. They're setting up full campuses in places like Dubai and also Qatar, these growing education hubs.
So not local universities, but branches of established international ones. Exactly. It sort of blends the best of both worlds, you could say. You get the global brand recognition, the academic standards, but with regional access. Students can earn that top-tier degree while staying closer to home, maybe in a more familiar cultural setting, and importantly, without the full complexity and maybe costs of moving all the way to the main campus country.
That's a really interesting strategy. It offers the prestige, the quality degree, but potentially lower costs overall. And less of a culture shock, maybe? It does sound like getting the best of both worlds in a way without needing to completely uproot your life. What do you see as maybe the longer term implications of that model? Are there challenges too?
Oh, definitely. It's a model with big implications. For students, like you said, it's a path to those globally recognized credentials, often cheaper than the main campus. Plus, there's a regional job market right there that values those specific degrees. For the universities, well, it extends their brand, diversifies their income, lets them tap into new talent pools without building everything from scratch. But sure, there are questions. How do you ensure the curriculum is truly consistent? What about faculty exchange? Does the student experience really match the main campus?
Right, the whole study abroad experience might be different.
It might be. Some of that cultural immersion aspect could be less intense. But for many students, especially if they're focused on the pragmatic outcome, that might be a trade-off they're willing to make. It definitely makes you wonder, is this satellite campus approach a kind of blueprint for the future? Quality credentials, but maybe less cost and hassle. It seems to be working well for the UAE, attracting that large Indian student population. It challenges our traditional definition of international education.
That really is something for listeners to think about. So, okay, let's try and bring all these threads together. We've seen the decline in the US and Canada, this huge surge in Germany, the UAE's innovative model. What's really driving this massive macro-level transformation in student choices? What's the fundamental why behind it all?
Well, the upGrad report itself, it's quite comprehensive. They surveyed over 100,000 people. And the demographics are key. 47% were 24 years old. Another 27% or so were 25, 29. So we're really hearing from the core group making these decisions. And the report boils it down to this: a growing demand for, let's call it, pragmatic, future-oriented education decisions. The key question students are asking now isn't just, where can I study? It's shifted fundamentally to, what career outcomes will this choice give me, and importantly, at what cost and what risk? That's the bedrock change.
So it's way less about the historical brand name of a place or maybe that aspirational appeal, and much more about the tangible ROI, the actual career path, and just minimizing risk in what feels like maybe more uncertain times.
Precisely. It challenges that older view of education, purely for its own sake, or just for intellectual growth. Now, it's very much seen as a strategic investment, and you have external factors pushing this too. We've definitely seen student visa policies getting tighter in places like the US and Canada. That means longer waits, maybe higher rejection rates, just a general sense of uncertainty about even getting there. It can make students feel less welcome, or at least less secure.
Creates anxiety around the whole process.
Exactly. Then combine that with the rising costs. We talked about tuition, yes, but also just living costs. Inflation's hitting everything. Accommodation, food, daily expenses. It makes the total cost of a degree incredibly high for many families, even fairly well-off ones. So when you weigh all that, the visa difficulties, the soaring costs against this strong desire for clear career outcomes, and then you look at alternatives offering affordability, stability, strong job markets, the shift starts to make perfect sense. Families and students are basically de-risking their educational investment in a more volatile world. They're prioritizing value, stability, and clear long-term prospects.
It's very clear then. The whole study abroad landscape has shifted dramatically, maybe permanently. Cost, job readiness, long-term stability, they've shot right to the top of the list for Indian students. And Germany and the UAE are really emerging as these compelling new frontiers, pushing aside, quite remarkably, old favorites like the US and Canada. So, thinking about these really profound, rapid changes we've discussed, what does this all signify? Not just for the students, but maybe for global talent migration, for education systems worldwide. Will the traditional powerhouses have to fundamentally change their approach, maybe even their costs, to compete? Or are we seeing a kind of permanent reordering where new hubs driven by pragmatism and accessibility increasingly shape where talent goes and grows? Definitely something powerful to ponder.